get started, I know those four of you are getting food, but you can hear us, right? Welcome, everyone. Thanks for folks who usually haven't come. We see a few fresh faces. I'm Alice Laughlin. I'm the chair. I'm from Putney. We're going to have a 2-hour meeting, so let's try to keep it as discussed to 2. What we're going to do tonight, we've been talking about the accelerated merger, and at our second meeting, the study committee decided that we would go ahead and do as the state, the law encourages us to do because of incentives. And that means we went ahead and looked at the accelerated merger, so we've been doing that. Along the way, we've been looking at other options, but now, over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at them more closely. So I think towards the end of this meeting, it might be sensible for us to decide whether, what we're going to keep looking at, whether we're going to keep chipping away at accelerated merger or veer off and look at other options in just as much depth. But in any event, we would want to do that, have that, vote or at least discussion tonight or within the next few weeks. Because if we were going to do that, then we would have to start spending some significant time on that report. So tonight we are going to look at the other options. If we do want to, I guess it depends how that conversation goes, but we could tonight also look at the board configuration of a unified district, whether it's in an accelerated merger scenario or in another. We've had several conversations with Chris Leopold, who's the study committee's lawyer, about some other ways of looking at that. So perhaps Brattleboro could be 2 members, 1 from each other town, and then 2 at-large members. So that might be worthy of discussion either tonight or in a meeting in the near future. What we've been doing is having folks, the public, they want to hear from you guys, and you need us to hear from you. We tend to do that towards the start of the meeting, but after we've sort of gotten into stuff, since tonight we've got a pretty focused agenda, I think we should go ahead and hear from you now. And then if you have questions, does that work, or do people want to wait a little bit? Do you want to hear from us? Okay, so what we're going to do is go from here over. Amy, do you have a list for folks to? Okay, so even if you're not speaking, please sign in for us and say what, list your town. When you speak, please do say who you are and what town you're from. Have I covered everything? Yep. Okay, and is that, Ian's going to be running late, but I think everyone else is here, yeah? Okay.
Should we approve the minutes of the last meeting before?
What a good idea.
Yep.
Has everyone read them?
So I'll move the minutes of the meeting of February 11th.
Okay, is there a second? Who's, okay, any discussion? No discussion? You don't want to chime in, Matt? Anything to add? Okay. Alice from Guilford. All those in.
I did send you something about.
Yeah, and if you want to add that in, we can add that in. I had already typed it all up and submitted it, so.
Now I gotta remember what it was.
Do you remember what it was?
It was just that we had discussed focusing this next meeting on the non-accelerated merger options and something like that.
I feel like that was already
Was that added?
addressed in there. Yeah.
So did I have some other comment? Must not be important anymore. All right.
Okay. Any further discussion? You're good, Amy?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, they stand. Thank you. Any abstentions?
Not abstaining because that was the next meeting.
Thank you. So Ricky abstains. All right, so let's start from, is there anyone who hasn't spoken at a meeting before who would like to start? No? Do you want to, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just, and this may be something you can't answer. I have that feeling.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Mimi Morton from Guilford. I've read part of the act, and I've read what Sean Murphy had to say in the Guilford Gazette, and our town report. And one of the things I see over and over again is that this act will try to equalize opportunities across the state so that ill-served schools will get more of what they need. And, you know, I just wonder, I mean, obviously it's not money you're talking about, just money, it's personnel. And I just was wondering how that would work, how you would shift personnel around, or would you shift students around, or can you even talk about that at this point?
So this part of the meeting is for us, it's not really a back and forth. So we're here to listen.
Okay, that was my
listen.
question.
I would say right, we could all talk to you for several hours about that.
Great.
And we've started to explore it, and we will do so much more in the future. And that will, how we have that conversation will depend on how this meeting goes, you know? So, yeah.
There is, from last meeting, all the meetings are on BCTV, and there was a substantial discussion that you might find interesting on that.
Okay, I'll access it.
And there's more information going on the website. There'll be more information coming out in the next week. I've got an op-ed coming out in the next couple of days, which will sort of explain some of the process. But
I don't have a clean copy of this, but if I had one.
yeah,
This one goes, yeah. I could give this to you.
yeah. So,
I'm just gonna share a document with you that shows, just an example of some of the, shared resources that we talked about. So you can kind of look
Thank
over
you.
here and see some of the,
Thank you. Do you need this back?
no.
Thank you.
okay. Anyone else on this side? Go ahead.
I'm Rick Seymour Guilford, and I'm, again, this is more of a comment than a question, but I'm concerned that I'm being asked to vote on a very significant, or will be asked to vote on a very significant change for our school, without having seen a budget of revenue and how, you know, where the revenue for the changes and the amenities are going to come from, and what the expenses are going to be. Because I think we're talking about a lot of expense, and I hear talk about savings and efficiencies, but you know I've never seen anything that really adds up to a budget on this question.
So I would say that you don't know exactly what budget you'll be voting for, and if at one point you are voting for something, chances are good, based on our conversations and plan forward, that there will be pretty serious forums in each town with a lot of data, which you might or might not understand.
We're gonna go over
But-
some of this in the agenda.
So we do have some numbers for tonight, but there would be more coming. But obviously a valid concern. Go ahead.
I wasn't originally going to say anything, but I guess I should, and just to answer your question in part, it's a question that I've been asking also all along, and it's difficult to know now where the money would come from for expanded program opportunities. It's very, I don't think the committee's been able to identify precisely what savings we might have so far. We've only been given small and hypothetical savings that are very minute slice of a total $57 million budget should all schools merge, if that is the course that is followed. But that may not even be decided until, if a merger is pursued, until a new board forms, and any decisions about a budget would be probably made by a new unified board that would be composed of 5 members from Brattleboro and 1 member from each town. So even
Well,
if
not
this-
necessarily.
Not necessarily. I guess there's more to hear about that. But I think this committee is now looking at other options as well, and that would involve an entire other calculus about which schools would be merged. My concern has always been that the only way savings could be achieved was through school closure, or raising taxes. to pay for new programs. So I don't know. Nobody knows. I think it's the answer.
I'd like to reserve some time during the discussion too. I thought that's what we were going to do rather than speak up front. But
What we're doing now, if there's time.
Okay, well,
As you know, I
a
try
couple
to
of
fit it in.
things.
Yes.
I'm concerned about the vote because it's been my impression that by law it has to be a one man, one vote type situation. So
So for what the,
no, on how I said vote. I shouldn't have. On the board structure, it should be a one man, one vote type of thing. So I'm interested to see how Leopold,
Yeah.
or whatever his name was, changes. One of the other things I just wanted to pass on to you, and maybe you've already seen it, but I got on the Marlboro website, and they've done quite an extensive dance partner thing.
Yeah.
And identifying all the schools in the area and what their classrooms, do they have art, music, do they have, what do they have? If anybody's interested in looking at that and not inventing the wheel about the other things. Other than that, I maybe as you go along discussing, I'd like to say something.
do you want to?
No, I don't have My name is Steve Redmond, Guilford resident. My concerns mirror Rick Seymour's. I'd like to see detailed information about what a Guilford budget and taxes would look like under any potential merger, any district merger. I'd also like to see detailed information about what expanded programs would be available to Guilford to equalize. Quality is talked about a lot, and I've seen what Ron has handed out, which is more of a general outline of some of the things that would be shared. But I would like to see, for instance, a much more specific set of things such as languages, what foreign languages would come into the Guilford schools. I'd like to see a detailed list of that before I voted on something. I'd also like to see guarantees that this school would not be closed by a vote of people outside of Guilford. I don't think that, I respect that everyone has good intentions, but this school is ours right now. We have a school board and we decide whether we have this school or not. No one else does. And I think that's proper and right. I hate to see that disappear. I'd hate to see the oversight that the school board represents towards, it's a system of checks and balances over both administration, supervisory union details, personnel, and cost matters, and is directly responsible to the voting electorate and is also able to act in a way immediately on any issue, is able to actually do something without consulting any outside source. I think that our kids are very well served by having a community school that is responsive to its community. I think our kids are very well served by relatively low class sizes. I think that an increase in class sizes, which this in many ways portends in order to produce some of the cost savings, is important. I therefore think that a situation in which autonomy is maintained by Guilford over its school and its school system is preferable in every way to one in which it is given up, and that equality can be managed and produced in a cooperative fashion through agreements with other districts. I think that there has been moves in that direction for things like special education right now, even under our present union. I think equality also requires an increase in expenditure. I think if you're going to have more classes like foreign language classes, for instance, you have to pay the teachers. I don't object to increases in cost, but I do believe that they should be managed locally. So that's.
Thanks. Anyone else from that?
Cheryl Redmond, Guilford resident. I'm very concerned about the implications of the road that we seem to be going down also. I'm very concerned with retaining some autonomy for Guilford. I think that aspects of the merger may benefit some towns, but I don't see any evidence so far that there is any appreciable benefit to Guilford from this. I think any talk about economies of scale, it's been shown that we have been able to manage our finances and, you know, in a responsible way on our own thus far. And so I really, again, just basically have grave concerns about the possible detrimental effects to this community and this school if we went ahead with a merger of any kind, and if we gave up our own voice and our own ability to decide what we want to happen for our school.
All right, Rick?
Richard Dummerson. I put a question in through proper channels, and I don't know if it ever got bounced off because I've had a big lapse between the meetings, but my question was, and I'll pose it as a comment, is can we put forth our existing model to the Department of Ed to see if it would pass muster? Do we have to wait until 2019 in order to do it? It seems to me that that would be the logical point, yay or nay, if it's just a language of SESU union to district and keep the existing, would the existing model pass? I mean, everybody's doing all this work and there's a lot of pressure, but to me, now that that time frame is off, it seems like that might be the starting point, and then fine tune it whether we do or whether we don't. Thanks.
Thanks. You'll hear more about that tonight. Oh,
John Murphy, Guilford. Maybe I'll say this just because, as a lot of people know, I wrote the piece in the Gazette, and I've been sort of in favor of this. But what I hear at every meeting that I go to really puts the burden of the proof on this board right here. I know you guys are working really hard, but what I hear at every meeting and every discussion, there's so much unknown. And I think if we have unknowns on February 24th, 2016, and I've said this actually in almost every meeting that I've been to, the deadline is coming right up. It's a rope across a ski trail, and you know, we don't want to hit it. And it almost looks to me like we are. So I think if all of a sudden everybody on this committee said, we have to get going. We have to get Chris Leopold down here. We have to get Donna Russo Savage down here. We have to go. We have to go now. You know, it's time to make the wheels spin. Or else it's not going to happen. And I've been saying that for a long time, but just hearing my fellow townspeople say that again, it's up front and center in my mind. And I think that somehow it's either got to happen or it will not happen. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and look at these options. So a couple of folks, Beth and Jill and Dave Scholes, started out two months ago, before Christmas maybe, working on looking at the other options. Then that came to the committee. We've looked at them a couple times. Then Christina and Amy put even more work in, and I stepped into that. We had a 2.5-hour conversation with Chris Leopold today, and we have a whole bunch of things to look at. Okay, and this might be the beginning. You know, this will no doubt be the beginning of some long conversations about each of these options, perhaps. So again, this is something that's been looked at by folks up north and then adapted and looked at by Chris and several of us. There are no doubt things that will be changed or corrected, but we're pretty confident this is good right now. No, but it will. It can be confusing. There's no doubt that this process, it's a 64-page act, and it's very detailed, and it's very easy to misunderstand little things. So hopefully there'll be enough to go around.
Do you have an Elmo or something we could put it up on for all the audience to see at the same time? Is that possible?
We have copies going around.
I can make more copies.
I just thought we could point it at
Yeah.
see if they
Yeah.
20 years ago, I did this.
So let's, the folks from Dummerston are gonna start to talk us through it. Let's keep our questions, please, until they pause for them.
What we did was, if you remember from our last study committee meeting, we took, I took a list of concerns from all the different towns, and we applied that to various options. You'll see there's the first column is accelerated, the next one is conventional, and then we added some phase 2 variations, and then ended with self-study and a go-alone option. And like Alice said, the three of us spent with Ron quite a bit of time with the legal counsel on the phone today, hashing through all of these things. So this was an attempt to see if there weren't options that would identify or meet everybody's, all the different towns' concerns. And I think it's safe to say that the answer is no. But, you know, there are some interesting compromise options on there as well. So if we look across, I don't know what's the best way to do this. Maybe by option?
Maybe by option. Can I interrupt? Yeah. Is there someone who can copy this and make this bigger for people? I think.
Yeah.
Landscape is a better.
Is there anyone who, can you do that? Because I'm sure some people can't read it.
Yeah, I'll try. No problem.
Yeah, but it's cut off, your picture cut off the edges, but it's bigger.
Is it the updated one?
Yeah, it's the one it's the one you sent out.
That I emailed to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
It might be better.
I wonder, John, from your computer, can you put it on
I'm gonna
landscape?
try.
Yeah.
No promises, but I'll try.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
for the accelerated merger, obviously that would include everybody. And it would be operate grades pre-K to 12. One of the concerns expressed was whether or not we would have school choice within the district. So that would mean like, for example, a Dummerston child whose parent maybe worked down in Brattleboro, it was more convenient for that person to have their child attend a Brattleboro school. Would that be a possibility? And the answer there is yes, and it would be managed. We currently manage it by 3%.
Yeah, elementary school districts are able to have a choice arrangement within the district where they set a cap on how many students can come into a school or go out of a school. Some set it at 3%, 5%. And it's just to make sure that, one, the viability of the school that is sending students maintains its numbers that they need, and that the receiving school doesn't get an influx of students that will affect their staffing and, you know, extra costs. So the schools currently are able to do that. That's what it means by managed.
So school choice outside of the new district? No. Once we would form into an existing, or into a new unified union district, is that right? Or, yeah, unified union. We would, any choice would go away. So that's a no. The voting equity issues, it's based on census data by state statute. It's not based on pupil population, it's actually physical census data. And when you break that down, it comes for a 9-member board, it's 5 members for Brattleboro and 1 member for each of the surrounding towns. There are some variations that are possible that we talked with the legal counsel about today, but we can go into that more.
And those would be at-large options.
Right, yeah. So it would be,
So there would be, for example, I'll repeat it.
right,
8 members who would vote on 1 from Dummerston, 1 from the small towns, 2 from Brattleboro, 2 could be from any town, but they would, all voters would have a say. Brattleboro could vote for the Dummerston, for example, so that makes sense to everyone, right? Yeah.
I have a quick question about that, though. If you did do that, would that mean every town would vote for every representative?
Exactly.
You'd be guaranteed that you'd have one from each town.
No, so you would have to vote for
People from
the,
Putney would vote for the Guilford
you
rep?
would vote, you would have to vote for a Putney rep,
Oh, I see.
a Dummerston rep. And
And then an
so
at-large.
there would be 2 at-large, so there would be a bunch of folks who could be from anywhere.
And just to be clear too, they would be representing all towns in that particular position. They would not be representing their own town in particular. They would be charged with being a representative of all the members.
Although each, as we've discussed, each one of those reps would be responsible for a school.
Right. Yeah.
To go back up, no, school choice outside of new districts says no, but I believe that if Vernon were grandfathered, that wouldn't be within the new district. If the kids still had the opportunity to go to Pioneer, that would not happen. That would not be
Yeah,
true.
so that's,
If it's grandfathered, the students that are starting next year at 7th grade could finish through 12th grade, but then they're.
Oh, the school choice would actually go away.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was definitively determined here recently, so we've had some question about it for a while. Going back to the voting equity and town meeting, we had quite a bit of discussion today about that. It would be like the BUHS meeting if we kept the term, I didn't understand the silent part of it that he talked about.
As long as you didn't, in your articles of agreement, didn't specify that it has to be Australian ballot, you could maintain kind of a town meeting
Right.
procedure like the BUHS 6 budget.
Right.
In other words, a meeting, people come and discuss it and vote, you know.
A question, I'm sorry, because we went moved on.
can you, there was some interruption, let's keep going and then come back to it.
So the change to town meeting, it would be, you'd be voting on the school budget, the whole union budget, at a town meeting type forum, similar to the high schools. And the interesting thing I thought from talking with Chris today was that the fact that Brattleboro Union High School does that is a real rarity in the state. That it's not normally that way. It's usually done by Australian ballot for a union or a district of that size.
So explain that again, the budget would be voted on how?
By voice vote, like it is now.
Like the BUHS budget.
Right.
So it wouldn't go to the individual towns
No.
at all?
No, it is not possible to do that.
Well, I mean, it could go to the towns, but it would be Australian ballot if it did, which is what you're probably more used to. There's a big disconnect, we've talked about this before, between what, like Guilford, Dummerston, and Putney have, and it's a driveway. Correct? Isn't that what I just heard you guys say?
But
Like if you put it in your articles of agreement, you could vote on it by Australian ballot.
But it wouldn't be by town, it would be by, well, I guess.
I mean, you'd still go to your own town to vote though.
Oh, yeah.
But it wouldn't come up on town meeting?
Correct.
Correct. It wouldn't
It would
come up
be
with
a-
that.
There'd be no discussion.
So like when people go vote next Tuesday, that's how Vernon passes there, or fails theirs, either way. Now, you can vote then. you know? Like when you go vote for your select board and your whatever else, treasurer, moderator, whatever's up.
So, I'm sorry, I want to make sure we all have this crystal clear. So you're saying that if we write it into the Articles of Agreement, we can make it so that everybody has to vote in all of the towns. But if you do that, it would go to an Australian ballot, which means that you just, I'm not sure if I understand exactly what Australian ballot is, so I'm trying to clarify it in my mind. So it means you go in, there's not a discussion thing, it's just a pass or fail, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
So and then the other option is to not put it into the Articles of Agreement and have an actual meeting as the BUHS board does.
Yep.
And at that point, you would have a voice, correct?
Yes. you would.
But then it would only be the people who show up. would have
Correct.
to-
It's no absentee, right? Am I correct? That
No.
means no
Yeah.
absentee.
No.
Okay, so, going on. The decision to close a school, oops, I didn't erase that part. Chris said that the decision to close a school and/or move a grade are two separate decisions. The decision to close a school lies solely with
The board.
the board. Yeah.
The new unified board.
Right, the
No
new
matter-
unified board.
No matter what's
The
written in the article.
5111 or the at-large.
Yes, so it depends solely on the new unified board. The decision to move a grade is totally different.
Independent of what we write in the Articles of Agreement that we've
Yes, he
been
did not
discussing?
recommend putting that in
Anything.
anything.
So this is new, am I correct?
Yes. Yes, this was from our 2.5 hour long conversation this morning
Just
with
this
him
morning.
about
Okay.
this in particular, trying to clarify what is and is not possible under the different options. So, educational programming, yes, it would be managed. You know, we've talked about it in some detail about how we might envision expanding things like foreign language and technology instruction, that kind of thing. Central office support would continue to be the same, but it would be streamlined, and instead of doing 5, 6 different budgets, there'd be one. So, you know, there would be some streamlining there. Maintaining individual school culture, this is a bit of a subjective thing, but yes, you know, it is, it's possible to maintain school culture, but then again, you know, like people have said, you know, have mentioned about not wanting or feeling comfortable trusting that future generations will respect that. You know, the same is true in this situation where with time and different changes in administration, there might be some type of shift. So it's, I guess you could say it's not guaranteed. It's likely, but not guaranteed. Controlling special education costs, including direct bill expenses. The direct bill expenses, for everybody who's not familiar with it, those are the out-of-district placements that, for example, Guilford might have to send a student because they didn't have programming here in their school, and we didn't have it within WSESU in the various options we had. It would require us to tuition outside of the supervisory union. So currently, those direct bill costs come right back to the town that the child originates from. So,
In the future, we couldn't do that.
right, yes. In the future, we can't do that. Yeah.
It would
Is
be
this really
shared.
the latest one? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it is.
Okay, all right. So,
And that's because if we were a unified district, there's no one to bill, there is no school board to pay the bill to, so all special ed costs would have to be paid by the unified district, so that would have to go there.
So there'd be no ramping up on that then? It would be a one-time thing?
That's how Chris Leopold made it sound.
I don't understand. What are we talking about?
There's no one to-
special education, phasing it in, so it's not such a shock to.
There's no one to bill though. He said there's no
Oh,
one to
that's
bill.
true, yeah.
There's no one to bill. We cease
Maybe
to, the day we cease to exist,
It
they cannot bill.
becomes-
So
yeah.
that's immediate. There's no ramping. It's that day.
Okay, so middle school decision, concerns about the middle school, that is a unified board decision, whether to continue to operate existing middle schools under the accelerated.
So he mentioned in the Articles of Agreement, you could include that you're offering 3 middle school options between Banners, Dummerston, and Putnam.
Did you say that again, Ron?
That in the Articles of Agreement for like school operations, you would specify that you have 3 middle school options.
Yes.
Yeah.
offhand, he said that you could put some time limit on the closing of schools and middle schools. And I'm trying to remember, like,
4 to 3.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years he thought was defensible. It was, in his words, you could say no schools could close for 3 or 4 years. But beyond that, it was not really defensible in his mind. It would probably not be approved.
So can I follow up on that? Because I'm still back on that other school closure that we had written. So where is Chris coming up with this today when we've seen other towns actually have that language and approved? Was it not really approved? Is that what he's saying?
This is based on all the acts that relate to education law and his very well-rounded understanding of the law and potential implications long-term, you know. I think he phrased it as he is giving us information based on his legal expertise, you know, as a specialist in education law, but also tempering it some with legal reality, you know, from what he's observed through the years.
He's also been working with several districts on their study committee drafts, their articles of agreement, and so I think that's his basis in addition to those statutes.
I guess I'm specifically questioning it because Beth came up with the wording based on something that you
Yeah.
had seen that was passed, and when we talked to him that other time, so that's new to just suddenly come up and say that
It's kind
You know,
of,
I don't think he's saying that you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think he's advising that you shouldn't do it. That you shouldn't strap the new board by adding particular language in there. He said you could go to a supermajority and those sorts of things. I don't think he was definitively saying that you can't let the town that's being affected weigh in.
yeah.
But his recommendation is don't do that.
And so was his recommendation, it wasn't based on the fact that he didn't think it would hold up legally?
He said they're defensible, so.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
that's a really big, that's a game changer. Yeah.
Right, and we should remember that we have been studying. So we are not creating policy right now. We're not having, you know, informal conversations at this table right now, that we are not writing language for any report right now. So we're exploring.
No, I'm saying
But
that's
it's
a
a good point though, because you don't know what's possible.
So exactly, but we're not, I've observed over the last couple of months that it's very easy for anyone in this room experiencing this moment to go off on a tangent, and I want to make sure that let's not assume we're going anywhere, that this committee is not making any decisions. I just want
So he.
we understand your point.
He specifically said, I'm looking back at my notes from our conversation, school closure, the decision of school closure, and he wasn't sure of the particular section, but it is in Act 153, and he thought it was Section 563, that clearly states that school boards decide whether or not to close a school, not a community. And that, I think, is where his basis for not recommending that towns be offered the option of voting.
Yeah.
And
You know, if you go onto the state website though, and you look under frequently asked questions, they specifically give an example of how you can write language into the charter. So I think here's your problem is that, again, we still don't know what to believe, right?
So we could talk about this for a long time, and we have talked about this for many, many hours at this board, at this meeting, and in other meetings. We will not know, if we decide to write a report collectively, it really depends on what the State Board of Ed, we will be sitting in a room with a proposal to the State Board of Ed, and they will make the decision on our report based on a variety of factors. So each situation is different. Hold on, Dan.
I do think
No,
it
we're
warrants
going to keep
discussion.
going.
It warrants discussion because it is a game changer for every small town.
I totally agree,
And
but
it is
Inez,
brand
please, we have so much to talk about,
This is the
and
most
this is a
important thing.
huge part of, this is a game changer. We
Yes.
haven't agreed in any way to say that this is,
Well,
we
let's
have.
talk about it.
Well, no, we're going to keep going because there's like
more-
7 of these to go
look at-
through.
This is only the accelerated, we really want to get to the other options, okay? So just going back to my notes from about the middle school discussion, like it says here, it's a uniform board decision, particularly under the accelerated and conventional mergers, and you're judged on equity, access, and opportunity. And we could say that for X many years, our grade configurations would not change without a supermajority vote. That was an option that he suggested. And so, anyways, that's like 3/4. So anticipated savings, that it has, we've identified some, about $100,000, right off the top, in different expenses from streamlining, and our experience with special education going all under the WSESU umbrella indicates that we might potentially save some more or not, we don't really know. And then the property tax implications under an accelerated merger, if everyone within WSESU participates and says, yes, we want to go ahead and do this, we are eligible for the 5-year incentives of 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2 cents off of the rate. And the other advantage too with property tax implications is that education spending would be based on the total ADM of the entire new unified district. So you have a much larger base for spreading those costs. Going on to conventional merger. So this would be a combination of any of us. It could be a pre-K to 12. It's similar to conventional, that school choice within the new union would be managed. There would be no opportunity for outside of district choice like there currently is with Vernon now. Unified board membership, the voting equity, it really depends on who participates. I had it originally plugged in 4-1-1-1 because, it would be Brattleboro and then 3 other potential schools, but it could be, any combination thereof, so I changed that.
But it would have to be based on population.
Right, and it is based on population, yeah.
But
And depending on what.
Or the hybrid version.
Right, the hybrid version or.
Which is based on population.
But it wouldn't necessarily be, it could not, it doesn't mean just one less town, it could be multiple less towns.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
What's a hybrid version? What are you guys talking about?
That's the at-large voting version.
Yes.
2 Brat, 1-1-1.
So town meeting for those participating could be, like we talked about, for accelerated, it could be like the BUHS board meeting unless specific wording is put into the articles of agreement and require it to be an Australian ballot. Decision to close a school, that remains, that is a decision by the new board, like it was before. Equity in educational programming, yes, that can be managed and phased in, like we talked about. Central.
Can I ask a question?
If it's quick, and I haven't allowed any because we're trying to get through this.
Why is this labeled equity in educational programming rather than moving grades?
Because educational programming was the specific concern that these members had here.
Right, but.
We wanted to make sure that we
You
could.
have a category of moving grades out of the school?
Yeah, it was
So
the
we
one that
talked
wrote
about that, yeah.
Yeah, and then,
That's closing to the,
no, and or, yeah, and then today, like I said, just a few minutes ago, yeah, yeah. It's a different decision, so.
The
then-
educational programming
Yeah.
stuff like foreign language and behavioral supports, all that.
So really, there should be another row in there for about the decision to move a grade, or actually it should just be pulled out because it's not appropriate at this level.
Right, unless we want to.
Would it be effective to just highlight going forward to highlight just the differences?
I was almost
Yeah, all right.
wanting to get a highlighter myself.
All right, so central office, that would be the same, yep. So everything else would stay the same. Property taxes, we would go to a 4-year. And then again, the advantage also there is that you have a slightly, a larger base than, a school or 2 alone would have to base the education spending on. And the MUD, I'm gonna need a little help on because MUD is very similar, it seems like, to the conventional merger.
Yeah.
So,
The accelerated has $150,000 transition, and would it also be with the conventional at $150,000?
I don't know.
That's on my other chart.
I believe it's only for the accelerated.
yeah, I think it is.
Well, we can double check.
For accelerated,
What was that, Rick?
isn't there a 5% top or bottom protection on the accelerated, but then the conventional is what it is?
They have it, the transition facilitation grant less than a state reimbursement of study committee expenses is available to accelerated. And according to Jill and Beth's chart, it's also available to phase 2, which is the regs and recommendations. There's nothing, it says no grant available for conventional.
Rick, are you asking about the tax rate increase cap?
Yeah, the protection
Yeah.
between the accelerated and conventional, I think there's a 5% on the accelerated that goes away after the conventional.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
can you
so-
look
going.
into that?
Yeah. Maybe we need to add the whole harmless thing. Again, these aren't complete, the concerns on the side, they were just a list of what we gathered at the end of last meeting, so they're obviously things that we can add to it.
This is a working document.
Yes, so MUD is very similar to the conventional merger in a lot of ways, in most ways actually. We could, with this one, offer middle school choice. We could send everybody to BAMS for middle school, or we could maintain existing. So that was one of the changes there.
What is the actual difference between a MUD and conventional?
Not a lot.
It's pretty similar. What he described is, if somebody decided that they didn't want to go with the accelerated, he advised that the modified unified district MUD is probably more appropriate than conventional.
What's the
Well,
difference?
I'm not certain
I
why.
think the one difference would be that if a town wanted to leave completely, we could have a conventional merger and a town could leave. But if a town wanted to stay in the supervisory union, it would be then a MUD. Because then you would stay part of the, let's just say Dummerston, because I'm talking, so Dummerston could stay part of the supervisory union and still send to the high school, but not participate in the K-8 portion of the merger. Does that make sense?
So then, but then Dummerston would be required to go to the state and make sure, separately as.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
It's a whole other
that's a
thing.
whole
They would have
other
to do,
thing,
yeah, they wouldn't be part of the same
Right.
application.
Chittenden East and Huntington have gone through, so that is the example that is existing. If you're curious how that looks. But Huntington is a pre-K through 4 district that has maintained its separate school and its separate town meeting, blah, blah, blah. And then the rest of the districts merge.
And the state approved that.
Did they did that under Act 46, so they were the
They
ones
did
under
the
Act
before.
46?
Yeah.
Did it before.
So the next two columns are union elementaries, unified union elementaries, with Brattleboro and without Brattleboro. So with Brattleboro, it would be a pre-K to 6 programs that would be offered. The board makeup would be slightly different. It would be, potentially 3 from Brattleboro and then 1 from all the surrounding towns.
Why?
Because we aren't including high school age. Because, oh, yeah.
I thought it was overall town population that decided the board made.
Yeah, that is
not student
wrong. Okay.
population.
Right.
Yeah, that is wrong. Okay. It could be BOHS or choice for the high school, depends on what the group decided. And then the town meeting, would be the same deal, it would be similar to the high school, the current high school meeting, unless it was incorporated into the articles of agreement that we want an Australian ballot. Let's see, everything else. Central office staff support, I left blank because it's more complicated.
Yeah.
Because you would not, you'd be forming this union elementary district, but you would not be dissolving the supervisory union, correct?
In this scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would have the unified elementary, you'd have the Brattleboro BAMS Career Center, and then you would have WSESU as the other part of it.
Does that mean you'd be dissolving the supervisory union under the previous scenarios?
Accelerated, yes.
This is the first time I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
But you're saying.
Oh, yeah, if that other person totally departs.
If they depart.
Yeah,
You're saying K through 6 though, so
yes.
what happens to Putney and Dummerston 7th and 8th graders?
That's a tricky thing. He thought it could be teased out in some way. He's never done this. It's unusual,
But, you know, they could
figure out the costs and.
It would be a unified board decision. You're jumping a couple things ahead of me here, but so it would be a unified board decision. And it could be, you know, they could all go to BAMS, you know, or you could maintain the existing programs or offer a choice. So, and then to be eligible for incentives, you have to have, for the 4 years of incentives, you have to have 4 towns join. So you have to have 4 members to be eligible in this scenario. And Union Elementary without Brattleboro, you know, it could be because Guilford and Guilford and Vernon, they send their 6th to 7th and 8th graders. Okay, so it could be like a pre-K to 6 or a pre-K to 8, depending on what, you know, how you framed it. You know, if you pulled those 6th and 7th graders in and sent them to, you know, other schools within the new union. You know, the voting equity would be a little more equitable. I don't know that 111 is really truly representative. You know, that's sort of a gross representation, but it would, you know, even things out some. High school could be BOHS or choice. Decision to close the school remains with the unified board. Let's see what else is different. There's less protection under when you're looking at special education costs because of the smaller basis. And did he say that we could, was this the one that we could direct bill, continue to direct bill in?
For those towns.
Yes.
I don't think we talk about that.
Okay.
Something else.
I mean, if it's BUHS or choice.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If it's BUHS or choice, why did you say no under the choice out of the new district for that option and the other one?
Because you don't have a choice for pre-K to 6 or pre-K to 8.
It's just 9 to 12.
Yes.
Excuse me, though, what are you talking about being a vote of the unified board if the 4 towns were separate? They wouldn't be under the unified board.
That would be
They would be
the
a
unified board.
4-town unified board.
Yes.
That would be one board.
Yeah.
I think then you couldn't, my guess would be you couldn't direct bill if it's a 4-town unified board based on what the ruling would be. If you don't have a town board, you have no one to bill. So,
Follow this logic.
there's one rate.
That's right.
Yeah. That would be
Yeah,
my
so-
guess, but.
So under the heading of my notes here for special education and direct bill, it says, if a union elementary, the district becomes dormant and all functions performed are performed by the union elementary district, the new one. Otherwise, well, this was the one with the options, where we had the town board that actually would have nothing to do, and then, yeah. What was that?
An odd scenario.
Yep. So, all right. So.
I think the key to that one is even as a small unified board, to share that direct billing, it's going to be very expensive with a small unit as opposed to a larger.
Right. Yeah. And then Union Elementary, if you have 4 members, you can get the 4 years worth of incentives. And like Ron just said, you have a smaller base, so to spread your costs out over, so that's something to be aware of. When we were talking, we looked at, Alice, Christina and I, we looked at a 2-part type of scenario where, and this was just an example where like Brattleboro and say Guilford joined up, or Brattleboro and Vernon joined up, and formed a pre-K to 12 union. They could potentially have school choice within the new district, pre-K to 5, and then no within for grades 6 to 12, because, or actually that would be 7 to 12, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So pre-K to 6?
Yeah, pre-K to 6, and then no choice for 7 to 12 within the district, because they'd all be going to bands and BUHS. So no choice out of district. The voting equity is, skewed towards Brattleboro because they're the larger entity. Actually, that one's wrong, BUHS or choice, so it's no choice, so it's just BUHS. Town meeting becomes an info session. And then, let's see. Town meeting. I'm wondering about that one. I think that one could probably stay if,
No, if you-
wouldn't they have to, not if they unify?
If you've unified, then both towns have to be president, just like,
So it'd be like the Brattleboro, or they could do Australian ballot, right? So they, okay, so that one is the same. Okay, everything else, central office support would be the same, but somewhat layered, more complicated. Yes, there would be the chance for maintaining school culture, but I think, with paired up with a larger entity that, the risks might be a little bit greater, but that's just a subjective statement on my part. I don't remember what he said about the special education costs here. Okay, no, he did not. Okay, so we don't have any feedback on that. Bands for the middle school. I guess you would say your anticipated savings from streamlining operations might not be as large as you would see in other scenarios potentially. And then the incentives are sort of questionable. You have to meet all the requirements of Act 46 or Act 153. So the availability of those, is truly dependent upon your ability to meet those requirements. And in combination with that, we looked at like a Dummerston, Putney, Vernon, and maybe even an outside district, running a pre-K to 8. And we chose pre-K to 8 because it fits the existing structure, what is currently offered in the schools. Choice within the new district could be managed, but it would be more limited than other scenarios. The voting equity would be a little more equal. They could go to BUHS, or you could offer choice, let's see.
That one is tricky though, because in order to do that, the BUHS union towns would have to vote to leave the union in order to give choice. The state would have to approve towns leaving the high school union, and then the other remaining members of the high school union would have to vote. The voters would have to vote to let us leave. So that's not exactly an easy scenario.
I don't know that I'm understanding what the layers thing means.
I think the goal there was we talked about a bunch of different scenarios, and these are the ones that seem to work the best to address the different concerns. And this one in particular addressed the Putney Dummerson concern about maintaining the middle school.
So the term layered, I
I
guess.
think some documents call it side by side.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Can I,
yeah.
at that point, I mean, but even in the side-by-side model, we've broken out the pre-K through 8 group versus the pre-K through 12 group. But even in that model, the way in which schools, going back, I hate to go back to where we began, but school closure remains exactly the same.
Exactly.
In fact, in any of these models we've gone through,
Yep.
there is no town option.
Right.
It just depends upon where you want to lay your
Yes.
stakes.
Where that change comes into effect is in the next two columns, which
Yeah.
is self-study, which is the way we are now, looking at how we might meet the state's criteria,
So is that
and
the
Act
do-
46's criteria.
That's the do nothing but try to justify?
Yeah.
Is that
Yes,
really-
it's the self-study where we study ourselves, show how we are providing equity among our schools, opportunity and
Would
efficiency. Yeah.
would that option also include the possibility of more consolidated things similar to what we've done with special ed, where we distribute, you know, like if we group together language and group together after school and we all took a portion of that and paid into it, would that fall under a self-study type option?
It certainly could.
Yeah,
Because
That'd be a shared service.
And then my question there is, does that meet our objectives of equalizing education but still maintaining our autonomy?
That's one of the ways that we could prove it,
Yeah.
Right.
to show it, that this is what we're gonna do to show.
Yeah.
you know, we'd have to look, I don't know, we'd have to look at the test data too, because there are some fairly significant discrepancies from school to school to show, and we need to look at the core curriculum, I think,
I
to really see
don't
how we're
think
gonna
what
address
we've
that.
demonstrated before, that you'd have to, well, the cost is gonna be different for initiating some of those expanded opportunities when you're doing it by individual districts as opposed to the spread out over the whole AEM. You know, we used some examples about that in the past. You know, like when foreign language, it would cost an individual district $36,000, so many $200-something per student as opposed to a unified district.
But if we acted in that respect, if we acted like a unified district where you're spreading the cost among just like special ed, right? I mean, isn't special ed, we kind of think of ourselves all as one big.
And that was done by statute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
I'm
guess
just
the-
wondering if we could do something like that.
I guess the
I think
question-
Beth was asking if you could do
Can you, guys, let's let
I think the question
let the
will-
committee talk. I know there are people holding their hands, but the committee's gonna talk about this and then I'll open it to the floor.
If I'm following this, the question boils down to what do the local boards and finance committee and stuff have the authority to put into the SU budget without, I don't know, I mean, you get a say because you approve your local budget, but that's the only say you get. So I mean, if you were to go this route, the way I'm interpreting this, like, who's to determine what you put into that? You know what I'm saying? Because like Ron just said, that there were state statutes that made you look at your lunch programming and your busing and your special ed and those sort of things, but where's the line? I don't know where it is. So what are you allowed to put in and what are you not allowed to put in? Because I mean, what in theory would prevent you from eventually moving everything in there? I mean, I'm not saying that that's the goal, but I mean, really what does prevent you from that?
So, and I think I want to throw out before we keep going on this, that there are no incentives with that version. And our business office has suggested that those might be $3 million worth of incentives that we would pass on.
So I didn't hear
No,
that.
Is there
it's
also penalty?
$3 million worth of incentives has been estimated. Go ahead. You
What
didn't
was your
get
point
that?
about the incentives? I didn't hear it.
If we pass on the 10, 8, 4, 2, it would probably be about $3 million of incentives is the current estimate. You were saying? Do you have something?
Pass on.
And the self-study model does not allow
yeah.
that.
I just a request that members of the committee in the future not refer to the self-study, or what we call the self-study thing, as a do-nothing option, which I heard tonight. I really think that we don't want to editorialize.
The reason
something.
I said that is because that has been how we've referred to it.
Actually, it wasn't
in the
you,
past.
I think it was over.
Well, but that's why I'm trying to figure out what exactly, she's the one who called it self-study, but I've heard it referred to as do nothing and then the state will do something for us. So that's one option, and that's why I asked for the clarification, because what Amy is suggesting is not that option.
No.
That's why I just asked that question.
Right.
It's something else
I
entirely.
think the self-study is a positive, it should be seen as a positive cooperative effort to produce the result that Act 46 asks for. Act 46 doesn't ask for us to merge districts, it asks us for us to cooperate and provide equality of opportunity and cut costs, and I think that can be achieved in other ways than simply, pushing all the districts into one.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, in my reading, and I could be wrong, but in my reading, you have the self-study group to stay the way we are, or you have the people that don't do anything. They don't have a study committee and they don't do anything. And I think what he's saying, they're really two different things, and the self-study is not a do-nothing.
Correct. And that's why it's included on
Yeah,
here.
but I think
because
there's
wouldn't
confusion.
I wouldn't put a do nothing on here because it's not
We're not
worth
doing that.
Yeah. So, self-study, Vernon would be able to keep its choice under the scenario. We do run the risk of, the state overruling this as an option. Let's see, what else? Everything else would stay the same pretty much. And then, like Alice said, there's no incentives involved. And then the interesting thing too that Chris Leopold mentioned in his conversation with us this morning was that one thing to bear in mind was that that there are probably going to be like 12 mergers before, the accelerated merge by the end of June. Okay, so by the end of June there will be 12 mergers across the state, and he wanted to point out that
The obvious.
that where is the money coming from to pay those people the incentives? And in reality, by doing nothing, you are funding. We would be funding those. We're paying for those
Coming out of the
incentives.
education.
Okay. So it behooves us to do something.
So our tax-
Study is doing something. And has anyone addressed the legality of even offering these incentives for people to vote a certain way? I mean, I'm sorry I haven't been at the earlier meeting, so it's an honest question. Has that been discussed about, sure, it would be great to get incentives, but has anyone talked about the fact that incentives are being given for people to vote a certain way? Money is being offered for people to vote a certain way.
Yes.
What about that?
There's a lawsuit actually already.
I think the ACLU has said they would take it up because it's
Good.
somewhat a question of violating Brigham, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yes.
The question is out there that why are we subsidizing schools when funding has been equalized? So yes, is the answer. Perhaps there will be a lawsuit and these incentives will not come to pass. I don't know.
It's arguably unconstitutional,
So let's-
under the Vermont
So-
Constitution.
I would say
So-
that arguable.
Yes.
I think it's pretty unconstitutional.
So the last column is a go alone, and I look at Just kidding. So this could be any one of our districts that goes alone and says we are not going to participate. We're going to go to the state. We are going to justify and show them that we provide equity and opportunity and efficiency. So you could operate at pre-K to 12. A lot of it becomes, you could have school choice outside of your district. High school would be choice. Your town meeting would stay the same. Your decision to close a school would remain the same. Obviously, it wouldn't affect your school culture. It would have a fairly significant impact on special education costs. It really depends on whether that district fully withdraws from the existing supervisory union. For example, if Dummerston were to go through the 3-step process to remove itself from WSESU, then we as a newly formed district would be totally responsible for all special education costs.
I think that's not true in the
No.
statute. Did Chris
Hey,
Leopold
you're interrupting.
approve that?
So, yes, he did.
Because I disagree. I've read the
You might
statute.
disagree, but
Yeah.
we're not
You might
asking
want-
you for your opinion right now. We're talking
And
about
then there's no
these.
incentives, that's the other thing. So that takes us through all of that stuff.
So,
I want to make an overall comment. Thank you guys, because this is a tremendous amount of work. Having started it, Beth and I are very aware of it. And you guys, congratulations. Actually, I think a little round of applause for people that spent that much.
okay, so guys, do we want to hear from the public before we start to hash these out? Or how do you want to progress?
I'd like to hear from you guys if you had one that struck you all as the right way to look at strongly, or,
I certainly have some opinions for at that point.
Do you want to hear
yeah, I want
these
to hear from
opinions?
the ones who
Or do you want
actually
to hear?
spent so many hours on it.
Go ahead, Ian. And then we will come back to you guys.
I see three options here that jump out at me as the three most viable. But first I'll touch briefly on why I think the accelerated merger is not one of them. And it's largely the timeline. We are pretty far apart right now from coming to anything. There is no way, realistically, I think we can come together soon enough to convince every single district town to accept that in time for the cutoff. So I really don't think the accelerated merger is an option. So the three I picked out are the MUD, the Union Elementary without Brattleboro, and the self-study. The advantage I see of the Union Elementary without Brattleboro is that's the one that comes closest to addressing school closure. Because we no longer have the Brattleboro steamroller in there that can just make decisions. You just have to convince one of your fellow small towns and your school is safe. So that really addresses that issue. My question for Vernon was on the school choice. From what you were saying, it seems like it's largely about the high school, right? Is the biggest concern with school choice in Vernon?
Yeah, the middle school, the kids that tuition is the concern.
Yeah, 7
They
through
will
12.
lose that, 7 through 12, so it's a little more than the high school, but yeah, 7 through 12.
But again, so not K through 6. So Union Elementary without Brattleboro also takes care of the school choice in Vernon question because you would have that. So if we can eventually all come to an agreement of some sort, then the MUD is probably the best option. If we decide we don't care about those two issues or can come up with some other solution. If we do and still want some kind of merger, then probably the Union Elementary without Brattleboro is the best way to go because it protects the towns, protects school choice Vernon. But I certainly don't want to discount the self-study because I think our schools are pretty good. And I really think we can justify what we've been doing all along with a few tweaks to address equity.
Richard?
Just as a question, which is that under the Union Elementary without Brattleboro, does that then mean that the other three towns in Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney would then be subsidizing school choice for Vernon?
Right. Unless we all had school choice.
Yeah.
I think we'd run into
Which
the
is-
same problem. I don't think it would be.
So we'd all have to have school choice.
But just for high school.
And middle school.
And middle school, because
Well,
that's,
not for K through 6.
Right, unless we,
But Dummerston
Those
and Putney
schools
have
would
K
have
through
for a
8.
year.
so there are ways to tweak that.
But you would have-
It's messy, I mean,
School choice, which means if parents wanted to send to BAMS, they could.
And school choice is cheaper than what some of the schools are paying per student, because you pay the state average.
well, currently we pay the state average, but the board might decide that that's not, that they actually want to bill it out at 17, right? Which might be the sensible approach. So,
Mr. Niels, I think by statute, if you're paying an independent school, it's the state average.
right, so I'm not sure about that. That was my original assumption, but I believe that we would look at it. I imagine we'd look at it. I just think there might be an approach to having, if Vernon were willing, to not have school choice for 7 and 8. I mean, all of the towns could have school choice, but it would be the 3 already established middle schools. And then just do the 8 to 12, or 9 to 12. I believe that's possible.
9 to 12 for.
School choice
School
for 9
choice.
to 12
But
for
you can't
everybody.
operate a high school and have school choice, right? So Brattleboro can be part of that if they're.
Right.
Right, so it would have to be dissolved. Yep. None of these are easy options, they're a lot of hoops.
Well, I think for me, given the Vernon Board's stance on where they're at, that the mud and the self-study probably make the most sense.
Which ones?
The mud and the self-study. The advantage to the mud for the other towns is if a town chooses to not be a part, or even 2, you could still move on to 3. You'd still be under a supervisory or a district umbrella, so you could get services that way, but it would also address Vernon's choice concerns. But it doesn't take all of the incentives off the table either. Like if you go with the accelerated or preferred option, the town votes no, then everybody is done for that year anyhow. So
Yeah.
I think with the mud, that would,
You don't have choice in the mud.
well, if a town votes no in a mud, they have
Well,
choice.
if you choose not to be part of the mud.
Yeah, and it allows a town to do that, is what I'm saying, and not stop it for the rest of them.
Okay.
So that's an advantage to a mud. I think that, I can't speak for all the other members, but I think that that would be, I know that's preferred over the accelerated. They definitely, my other board members are not in favor of the accelerated.
Can I ask, Matt, what happened the Monday night? You did have your community forum, right?
Yes.
And we're gonna hear back
Can we
today.
can we not do that now, though?
Well, I just wondered if it was, on school choice, was that did the community forum say clearly the same thing as the board said?
In a roundabout way.
And, yeah, it wasn't a fully fleshed out discussion, I'd say. Can we, Mark, can we hear from you?
I'm going to more or less have to agree with what Matt is saying. The mud and self-study make it like it could be a viable option.
Sorry.
So the mud.
So MUD, are you interested, and would accelerated merger still be on your option list?
The time constraints, there's so much to be resolved, so much to be answered, so much to be calculated, if the time is acting against us.
So MUD and what else?
Well, the second choice would be self-study, but primarily mud.
Alice? I'd like to go around the table and hear people's opinions.
I would lean towards the mud or the Union Elementary without Brattleboro. The only other comment that I have is because it was so crafted so quickly to do the accelerated, and it just seems like a day. I'd like to see us craft a self-study as quickly as you did the accelerated merger, to see how we could come forth together as we are. I understand that this year would be fabulous for, you know, the clerical end, the bookkeeping and whatnot, but I think that our small towns deserve the right to see what it would look like crafted in another way. I mean, I truly believe that we need to preserve our communities.
Beth?
I think for me, the school closure discussion is kind of on the forefront of my mind. Like that's a 100% game changer for me. So how that gets resolved is important. The other thing is if we're 99% sure that one of our towns is not going to go for the accelerated, is it a waste of our time to continue with that? I don't know that it's worth continuing. If the mud is something that everybody can get on board with and it buys us a whole other year to talk about it, then I think that's what I would be in favor of.
So MUD, nothing,
Well, no, so, I mean,
just give me some.
yeah, so MUD, I think, agree with Ian. The MUD, the Union Elementary without Brattleboro, and the self-study. would be the three that I would be interested in continuing to look at. And like I said earlier, I'd be particularly interested in the self-study option, but with that kind of merger feel, but still maintaining our own, like, can we group it all together and then dole out the costs?
Okay. Kim?
I guess I know we've been doing a lot of work on the study committee, and I just feel that, I don't know if it should stop with us that we're not giving the citizens of our towns the proper, giving them a chance to vote, because we cannot make that decision for every single voter in each town. They need to make that decision. I mean, we need to make sure we're presenting everything, but we can't take the accelerated off because it is not right to not offer it to people.
So you're still interested in?
I think we still have to be, because we need to, we're representing everybody. There are people that don't want to do it, but there are people that do, and we need to represent everybody, and everybody should have a chance to vote.
So what other options would you also be interested in looking at?
I mean, obviously the self-study's always, I mean, but the only, at that point, anything else would be mud.
Okay. Jill?
I don't know really what the question is.
So which of these appeal to you for further exploration? What do you think is a reasonable approach ahead?
I guess I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of with Kim that I feel like there's still some real advantages in the accelerated merger. That's what Beth and I looked through. I'm with Beth with what she says, that there's the Chris Leopold's sudden statement on school closure. I thought we were kind of coming to some ways here and thinking it through at least on how to deal with that. And then it sounds like what he's saying negates everything else that we were all talking about. And I guess I'm kind of sad that we started this thinking of what was going on with the kids and the equity, and we looked a little bit at the equity, but I was most enthused about that and trying to bring that part into the equation. And I'm not sure if we address it so much with some of these other things.
Richard?
I think one of the things I'm struck with is how similar all of these options are. And so, regardless of whether you do accelerated, conventional, mud, all the way across, the realities of this change is the same. The time difference is there. I worry with the mud. I mean, as I understand it, if Vernon was to be that one on the side, they would still have to go through a process to be approved individually.
Yes.
And what is the state going to do? I mean, what is, when I look at what Act 46 is pushing us towards, what can Vernon do in order to satisfy the state on their own relative to this mud? And if the mud is dependent upon that, then I don't know where that falls. And so, in part, then why not go to the accelerated version? Because in the end, we may end up there anyway. That's one part. There's something I really do like about the Union Elementary without Brattleboro from a Putney perspective. I think it gives more autonomy to the small towns. And I think our community would really appreciate that. The self-study option, again, given the way in which everything is pushing us in a very particular direction, under what circumstances will the state allow us to keep going the way we are? And I just don't know the answer to that question. But everything else seems to indicate that they don't want us to go that way. And whether we like it or not, I mean, that's a different question. But so I'm disheartened by that, because I think there might be really interesting ways that we could go that we could do the self-study model. But if in the end the state really isn't going to approve that, then I'm left with, I guess I'm left, if I have to choose one, I'm left with Union Elementary without Brattleboro K-8.
Ricky?
I agree with Richard in that so many of these look so similar, and there's so many pieces that are the same. And the thing that I've asked some people in the last few weeks is, every time we have one of these meetings, it always seems like some town feels like they don't actually come out and say it, but that like we want out. Like everybody wants to basically, like they're gonna take their ball and go home. They don't want to play with Brattleboro. They want out. And that might be the case, but like we don't know that for sure. And it just seems like that's sort of like an underlying current in all of these conversations, that at any moment somebody's gonna go, we're done and we're leaving. So I don't know. I think that I would say if I had to pick right now, I agree that the mud or the self-study are probably the two best options for us. One, to give us some time for people to think about and talk about. And I agree to the statement that was said earlier that I think a lot of what we do is really good. And we might be able to justify that to the state so that we can keep doing what we do well. Maybe find some efficiencies and things along the way, but so I guess I'd go into one of those two places if I had to pick right now.
Amy? Well, at this point in the day, I don't know if I can really discern between all the different options, but I will try. So I don't think accelerated merger is going to fly. I think there's too many variables, particularly with Vernon and school choice. So I think conventional and mud, since they're so similar, would be really interesting options to look at. And they would address the similar interest that I have to Jill, which is addressing equity, educational equity. I feel like that is really the primary focus of this, because I would really like for all the kids to have the opportunity and be equally prepared to enter high school. Beyond that, I'm intrigued with the Union Elementary, with or without Brattleboro. I think there are distinct advantages where you can get that same type of equity, more so with the Brattleboro option, less so with the other one. And then, I guess there's a self-study, but I just, like Richard said, I don't feel like, that the incentive is there. Well, that's a poor word to use, but the advantages aren't really there. Speaking from developing budgets for 12 years with Dummerston, each year it has been a challenge of a different sort to try and maintain what we have now. And luckily our administrators are really creative in reconfiguring things and making it work and still providing the same or even better services. But I think there's going to reach a breaking point where I worry about the viability
of self-study.
Yes. So,
Christina?
I agree with Amy as well. The accelerated merger is going to fly, and so it's a lot of time and expense for us to keep looking at an accelerated merger, and it prevents us from answering these questions. And I don't think that we should feel that the work that we have done has been for nothing, because I think we are all much better informed. We all are sitting at the table talking about things that we've never talked about before as districts. And I think we all come better informed about what our particular districts that we are representing are interested in doing, which we had no idea 6 months ago. And I thank all those people who've come and given their opinions, although sometimes it has made things go more slowly, but I think that's really an important part of this process. I'm extremely concerned for Dummerston and Mud about school closures. And I think that until we can really explore what is going to be okay with the AOE and what is going to be legal, and we experience all this, I would have a harder time with Mud. And Brattleboro, I love you, but it's not the people at this table, it's something 15 years down the road, and the effect it would have on the small community not to have a school, which is the center of many of our small communities. So that said, I think I would be most interested in the Union Elementary School or a self-study.
I'm going to ask Ron, Frank, and Lyle to chime in a little bit if you could, starting with Ron.
Yeah, so I've often felt like it's only fair to bring the accelerated to the towns, but knowing what I've found out about Vernon, I guess I don't feel that that's viable. We did hear today that you could craft a voting article that would allow to vote on the accelerated, but also have language that if So it's a vote to create a unified school district, or in the event of one or more not accepting that, in other words, if the town voted out, if a majority of the other towns voted yes, you would create a MUD. So that's just an option that you could consider. I'm not saying that you really should.
We don't get the 10 cents.
Yeah. If you
So
don't
why
go
would
the
we-
accelerated.
So why would you want to rush it with one vote? What was
I'm not saying rush it, I'm just thinking of what Sean has said in the past, to give the townspeople the ability to make that choice. And they may choose not to do it. Given what we've been talking about and what we've been working on, I think the MUD or conventional are very similar. The MUD seems to make more sense considering Mount Mansfield Union, Chittenden East with Huntington deciding to stay out. That's the most common or the best example of a MUD that we have seen. So I could see that as a viable option. I think it gives us more time to really explore the language about school closures, because I don't know that we're getting the right information on this. I think as they go through the first year cycle on these study or these approved agreements, we'll have a better sense of that, about the school closures and how to protect small schools. I just don't know. I'm just going to talk about some of these other options. The Union Elementary with Brattleboro, without, I don't know. I guess I understand the one without Brattleboro helps prevent school closure in that sense. I just don't think you get the equity, and I just don't think you have the size in terms of the student population to get the benefits that you would in, let's say, a MUD. And then the self-study, I just don't believe that we're going to afford the providing those programming alternatives that would provide the equity. I think the cost of the programs to small districts, that's why we haven't been able to do it. And I don't know that in our current structure, I don't know that you could expect Brattleboro to pay for the summer school for Guilford, as an example, or another town to pay for foreign language for another town. I think when we look at small districts in their budgets, we know the pressure that an additional $20,000 is going to cost to their budget and their taxpayers, and that's why we're not able to do the things that we'd like to do. So again, if we don't go with the accelerated, we have time to put together information about the study, self-study, but I don't see how, I don't see that as a viable option, but,
Frank? Thanks, Ron.
So I agree with everything Ron has shared, maybe just a little elaboration on a couple of the points. And as Amy has mentioned, others have mentioned, one of the biggest concerns is equity of opportunity, and when we look at over time our proficiencies in learning in math and literacy and science, we see extreme variations, and it's not just one year in one subject, it's consistent. And so as Ron is pointing out, we've looked at some of the interventions that have been invested, that worksheet that's been made available and developed around the various academic support programs, the teacher leader programs, the after-school programs. Those are the things that we know our most successful schools have fully implemented. I mentioned last study committee, there's a very, very well written case study analysis by the group that has developed this adequacy study. And we have two schools out of all schools in the state exemplified as systems that are producing terrific results, and they're within the resources that the study folks have indicated as an affordable, sustainable model that the state can support. So I think to wrap up the comment is that our best opportunity for that is at least having like systems, which would be Brattleboro School District, the elementary school district, along with our other school districts in Wyndham Southeast, to share resources and leverage the success that we have. We're enjoying that success, but we're not enjoying it in all of our schools.
Thank you. Lyle?
Thank you. I don't mean to be offensive to any of the people that are here, but I feel when we've been talking about the accelerated that we're hearing from a very small portion of the population, and we're hearing that the people that are generally with us are not in favor of the accelerated. So I have to go back to what Kim said and say, is this representative of everybody in our towns? And I don't think that we know that. And without taking the accelerated to our voters, we won't know that. Having said that, I appreciate the fact that we're hearing from some townspeople, and I absolutely agree that the timeline is too fast for us, that we have not gotten the answers that we've been asking for. We try to give you the information that we get, but we don't get, as you well know, the information that we need. So I do think we should be able to take the accelerated option to our voters, but I'm not pressing for an accelerated merger. I do think that what Frank just said with proficiencies, I think if we do a self-study, we're going to find out that there are some schools that are very proficient in teaching literacy and math, and some that are less so. I think that's going to become very obvious, and that's going to really lead us to looking closely at equity in education. We talk a lot about foreign language. I'm really concerned about literacy in math and writing instruction. That, to me, is a higher priority. And yes, I'd love to have all of our children have foreign language, but even more so, I want all of our children to be able to read and write and do math. And that's why I think a self-study may give us some information that some people are uncomfortable with. But
Alice, I have one question for Frank, and Frank, just a ballpark wild guess. If we do not take the accelerated and lose the option of the 10% for the first year, what is that monetarily going to cost the districts, or as a group?
Well, it's hard, that's the easy answer, which is overly simplified, is what Sean has provided with us, which is simply the 10 cents on the existing grand lists. And as I recall, that was first a couple $100,000. It's what,
900.
I'm sorry, 900. Okay, a little under $1 million.
All I did was I got the information from the state on what all 5 towns paid in 2015 to the state for education. And I just took those numbers, and it's actually the number that you would look at from the homestead education tax. It's line 4 of the papers. I actually have them with me. So I just took those numbers and I multiplied it times 10 cents, added them all together, and it comes up to $9,990. So just shy of $1 million. What that means is that property owners in the district collectively, so it depends on how expensive your house is, but that would be the amount of money that the state does not collect from the district in the first year. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so I'm gonna hear from folks here, and then I'll open it up.
You haven't spoken.
Yeah, how about
I
you,
have.
Alice?
So, right. So I'd have to agree with Richard and Amy as well. I wish, I think at the end of the day, we're gonna end up more like the accelerated version than any of us suspect at this moment, no matter how we move forward. But I think, I also, so I'm just putting out that that's my suspicion. I also think if we don't do the accelerated merger, that we're going to learn over the next year or two that the act is going to change pretty dramatically. There are going to be lawsuits because the incentives do not sound, aren't acceptable to me as a resident of the state of Vermont. They just don't feel right. So those will change, perhaps. I'm not fully confident. I do have great concerns for the people and taxpayers in my town who actually do have expressed to me that they are in favor of the accelerated merger. So not going forward on it, even though I have great concerns about it, I have to reflect on that. I'm tempted, Rebecca Holcomb, backing up. There's one merger that seems, maybe best for Putney, and that would be the unified elementary without Brattleboro. The self-study, I don't think I'm comfortable with if the incentives stand with the state. The people in our community spending, not getting $3 million in tax incentives, and that makes me uncomfortable. So I guess I'd lean towards collectively not looking at the accelerated merger for a couple of weeks, assuming that we are going to move forward on it. But we are going to hear from Rebecca Holcomb. She's going to come visit us on the 17th. I'd be interested in hearing from her. Not that she can actually speak to us directly about what the Board of Ed would talk, how they would address any of our issues, like, for example, school choice, which is, that takes the accelerated merger off the table for Putney, right? If the school closure, not the school choice.
Right.
So obviously, there are lots of things that take the accelerated merger off for Putney, I'd say.
For others.
And for all of us. It's a complicated decision, but I would say, show that I'm not in favor of pursuing it at this time.
I agree. I think if the board here, who has spent hours and hours studying all of these merger possibilities, is not yet able to get the information they've asked for, is not yet really understand the implications of all of these things, that it would be really imprudent to ask the voters to make a decision who have even less information about this. It seems to me that if you did know and did have answers to all of your questions about what the accelerated merger would mean and how it would play out, then you might present, okay, this is what it means to the voters, and then they could perhaps in an educated way vote for it. But when the committee itself is confused about what it means, then I can't imagine why anybody would want to put a vote out there to the public about that, because nobody knows what it's actually going to do. The second point is just that I think that it's true that the state could, in a self-study, decide that the self-study was not worthy, and that therefore it was not, that they would make a decision otherwise than what the proposal for the self-study. Mm-hmm. However, that would simply put you in the position that you are if you chose one of the other options. So therefore, it seems to me that there's nothing to lose for those who are interested in self-study, not for those who aren't, but for those who are interested in self-study, not to defeat yourselves and say, oh, well, the state might choose not to accept that, because you still might go for it and see whether they would accept it, and if they don't, well, then you're doing the other thing.
Dan, just so you know, we have about 15 minutes.
Okay. I'm Dan Normando, school board member in Dummerston. A couple points. One, I totally hear what you're saying, Alice, about, money is worth something to everybody. It truly is, and I don't want to short shrift that. But it's all about how it's presented. If people believe that it's millions of dollars we're losing, that's one thing. It creates a totally different emotion than telling them if you had a $200,000 house, it would be about $1.60 a week. Totally different perception. So I think I think we all as board members have an obligation to make sure that we give information in a manner that doesn't create fear and actually creates more of what the reality is. Another point is about whether the state's going to force, if we did the self-study, if the state's going to force us there anyways. I think I would like everybody to remember that we are, if not the best, one of the best performing SUs in the state. And I think, while there's always risk, I think it would really, the state would have egg on their face if they tried to take a model SU in the state and say that you're not doing well enough, we're going to force you into some other structure. The question of equity, I may have missed it. I know you guys were looking, or I think I know you were looking for an answer of what that meant from the state. The Act actually calls for substantial equity. And so I don't know if we've really vetted that out enough as to what that means. I had one more and I can't remember, so I'll pass.
Who else on this side? Just Jody? Okay.
A couple of things. I'm Jody Normando and I'm from Dummerston. One of the things that I wanted to say is about the PICA report. And you keep saying that we have these 2 schools in the area that are exemplary schools. I read that PICA report, and what it said exactly is that these 2 schools were the most improved because of what you had done, rather than the most exemplary. Because like one of them is higher test-wise than Dummerston, the other is lower test-wise than Dummerston. And so they weren't picking the exemplary schools to study, they were picking the spread, if I'm not mistaken. The other thing is that I want to tell everybody that they can go to BCTV and watch the Vernon meeting Monday night. Mike Hebert talked a lot about the choice and everything, but one of the things that he said that struck me was that he wants to have Ms. Savage and a member of the House Education Committee to come down, as well as Secretary Holcomb, who is already coming, come down and talk to us about that. Because, Alice?
Yeah.
Excuse me, no side conversation.
Well, I had a conversation with Rebecca Holcomb's office about what,
please.
Yeah, where I'm getting a response.
Anyway, and he said he's been dealing with this educational thing for the last 3 or 4 years, and there's going to be a lot of changes. Maybe not this session, but at least next session there would be. There's a new law, a new proposal for a law coming every single day up there at the legislature for changes. And but he would like to have these people come down so that we all, or the boards, can all talk to these people directly. He did say also, as Dan had said, that this is a super SU, and that we're well known up in Montpelier as being a super SU. And he really didn't think, after talking to Ms. Savage and to Secretary Holcomb, that we would have any problems going a self-study. What I'm concerned about is that if we're going to go and do a self-study down the road, that we have to be very positive about our things and not think among ourselves that we can't do this. And that is my one concern about the self-study.
Just to follow up on what Beth was talking about before, under a self-study option, there are a lot of efficiencies that we could achieve by contract instead of by unification. And I think that's, did I understand you correctly, that by cooperation and contracting, we may be able to achieve a lot of the efficiencies that we could achieve in unification, but still retain board control over school closure, board control and approval of each school's budget. And in terms of equity, I haven't heard many concrete examples discussed of how we would actually achieve substantial equity and where the money would come from for the substantial equity. And maybe we can achieve that equity by, I don't know, sharing information and collaborating among districts, and that can be achieved without unifying in a mega union and losing each small town's character, voice, and community. I just think it's a possibility, and I would urge everybody to take the time that we have to study everything carefully.
I read the minutes from the Putney meeting because I missed that. And one of the things that I looked at was the SC, the self-choice. And as it was explained tonight, it is the managed part of it. But I'm sort of thinking that it should be very clear that school choice is really a very limited option. It would be used in very prudent ways. And if somebody looks at school choice, they think, oh yeah, I can just send my kid wherever I want them to, which isn't, you know, I think it's a little disservice to the people to make sure that it's understood that it's a limited option, as we have at Brattleboro Union High School, but it's used, you know, it's only 10 students a year.
Right, so there are two kinds of school choice. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just talking about school choice in terms of
Within.
parents being able to send their kids to a specific elementary school. And the other one is Vernon, which is the grandfathered self. So I would call that grandfathered self-choice, so.
One of the things that Chris Leopold mentioned specifically with respect to choice, this pertained to middle school. One thing that he emphasizes that if we say we merged and we kept the existing middle school programs, we could not restrict access to any of the existing middle schools like BAMS, Putney, and Dummerston, that we would have to we couldn't specifically reserve spaces for only Dummerston students in the Dummerston school. It would have to be equal access, you know. So that's another nuance to that, you know, that we have to consider.
But I'll also say point taken that we should find another word to describe choice versus choice.
Yeah,
And
we've
that-
talked about
get
that.
in the weeds of that, student movement within, I don't know what the word is, but point taken, that we've said that many times, and we just put this together
Yeah,
and
and I
said that
think
today.
the idea of school choice is, I equate it in my mind to the death knell of public education. If you have school choice, then, you know, people can collect their checks and send them to private schools. You know, if it's truly school choice, which, you know, I don't think is a good thing to, we shouldn't promote that.
Yep. Go ahead.
So-
And then you, okay. We have about 5 more minutes.
We went around and had everyone discuss and say what they're thinking, but we also said a couple times that we didn't know exactly what happened in that conversation and we needed to investigate more of the school closure discussion. So, and that was the game changer for a lot of us. So I feel like we need to make sure we come back to that and really understand what our options are if we did the accelerated merger still or in any of the others on how school closure wording could be written, or whatever your discussion was today.
So for me, Jill, this is just for me, the finding this week from Donna Russo-Savage and for the board of Adjournment, I mean, we got definite answers this week that if we do accelerated, we can only grandfather the kids to tuition for high school and middle school, not for, you know, not school choice, it's tuition for us. So I think that's where I came from for looking at different options, but that's just
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
so.
But for a lot of the rest of us, I think we do. But thank you, Matt, for the clarification. You must have gotten something I haven't seen from Donna for Vernon.
Well, we saw it about a month ago, but it was contrary to what she had written to us in September. And now it's looking like the Agency of Ed is saying the only way Vernon can maintain its version of school choice, 7 through 12, is if they become a separate district. Or they chose to just grandfather the kids next year on to the senior year.
Is that an email that was sent to the whole study
No.
committee, or?
Not the whole study committee, but.
I'm sorry, what?
It wasn't, it was probably sent initially to myself, Amy, Frank, Lyle, Alice.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one is kind of an update on the same thing.
So what I'm going to suggest, or it's almost 8, is that what I'm hearing is that the majority of us are not inclined to pursue the accelerated merger, but there are some questions left about that. So I would suggest that we have a couple of meetings in the next few weeks, and then we meet with Secretary Holcomb. I'm going to suggest that we research the school closure and the school choice issues a little bit more, get some legal language from Chris, perhaps share it with Donna, and then share that with the secretary when she comes. It might be a little bit of a pointless approach to float the discussion a little bit further, but it sounds like it might be helpful.
Alice,
Yep.
when you send off information to Roxy,
Yeah.
could you email the body for response back? So
Well,
we
what
all
I
are
would
on
bring
board?
is a legal, what I'm gonna suggest is that he writes something up for us,
Yeah,
which we could all,
can visually
exactly.
look at it before we come, because I
Yeah.
really feel awkward just hearing something and just not be able to interpret it visually.
I totally understand, yeah. So does that work? And meanwhile, I suspect we want to start, well, we have a meeting on the, well, we have a scheduled meeting on the 2nd, and I'm wondering, since we're slowing down, perhaps, whether we want to not have that meeting. I'm just throwing that out. But we could have it, and then we have another meeting on the 10th, and then the meeting on the 17th. Does anyone have a suggestion about how we want to proceed over the next 2 weeks?
I think every 2 weeks is good.
I'll second that.
So we'll meet on the 10th
So
then?
we skip the second.
Yeah.
Which means, Joe, we can have our meeting, it's not gonna be truncated.
But we still have the fire and police right across the road, or across the hall.
So,
So if we meet on the 10th, we're going to investigate more detail of school closure and school choice answers and word and legal language.
Yeah.
What else?
and it sounds to me like what I'm hearing, we want to learn a little bit more about the MUD options, the Union Elementaries,
He said he would send me something with that.
and the self-study. I didn't hear anyone talk about any of the others. Is that correct? Guys?
Yeah, I was kind of putting little tick marks in the end of the columns when people were talking, moving around. And the biggest ones were the MUD, the Union Elementary without Brattleboro, and the self-study. Were the
Sounds-
three that most people were interested in the most of.
Do you want to move the 10th meeting to Academy? Since we're skipping Academy, it goes back to PCS. Do you want to?
We could do that. Does anyone hear that? When you say that?
So right now, for our meeting next week, we were scheduled for Academy School. Then the week after that, we go back to PCS. Do you want to go to Academy in 2 weeks rather than?
And then we're going to be in Putney. So that works. What?
Academy on the 10th?
Academy, so we're skipping the 2nd, Academy on the 10th, and then the 17th back at Putney.
So even the school board.
Yeah, they'll just have to come. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for all your incredibly hard work for no pay. You know, dealing with incredibly complex issues and mysteries and game theory and what's Vernon going to do, and I'm very impressed. And you know, I'm reassured. I certainly have my preferences in terms of outcome, but I think you've done a great job.
Yeah, Jody.
May I take on the hat of Charles Fish, who couldn't come here tonight, and just for the benefit of the Guilford board members, he's been coming to all these meetings, and his big thing is the loss of town meeting and the loss of community. And I just want to pass that on to the Guilford board, the Guilford members.
Well, and I would add that, you know, a town without a school is not a town.
No.
Yes, Mark.
I just want to end on a happy note. You know, I've been associated with Ron, Lyle, and Frank just recently for, on and off for 9 years. I just want to say that they have never lost sight of trying to find economies, equities in education, diversity, trying to do all of the things that have been brought forth in this particular act. And they have always been doing this. I don't want anybody to lose sight of the fact that this is, in a certain measure, redundant to what they've already done.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Is there? Yeah.
Just a public service announcement that Guilford's doing their Act 46 study committee meeting on the 21st. Or not study committee, sorry, their Act 46 forum on the 21st, which is in conjunction with one of our regular board meetings.
March?
What time?
March
March.
21st, here at 6:30. It's a Monday night.
Do you want us to stay away, or do you want us to?
No, I do not want you to stay away.
I don't know.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
6:30.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? We're adjourned.
Thank you.